Hello, welcome to Strangers in a Strange Land. We continue our conversation with Megan, who is currently in Scotland, but I met her in Sydney many years ago when, of course, we were 21. Let's stick to that story. Megan, would you like to tell us where you've been, how you got there? Just introduce yourself.
Okay, hi Megan. I am in FreshFruit in the west of Scotland, near Glasgow Airport at the moment, in the middle of COP26, or towards the tail end of COP26. So we've got people from all over the world in Glasgow at the moment. I was, prior to coming back to Scotland in 2017, I spent 17 years in Sydney, Australia. I travelled quite a bit before that, but what brought me to Sydney was a sense of adventure and feeling that there was more out there than what was available in Scotland. I was a lawyer at the time, and I was sponsored to go out and work for a big law firm in Sydney in their intellectual property department. And I thought I was going over for a couple of years and ended up staying for 17.
Famous last words.
Yes, yes.
Almost everyone we interview says exactly the same time. The same thing. We're going to go 2 years.
Yeah, and both of my children were born in Australia. Only one is entitled to Australian citizenship because we weren't permanent residents for quite a long period of time. And now the children, of course, considered themselves to be Scottish when they were in Australia, but now are very obviously Australian in Scotland.
How long have you been back?
Yeah.
How long have you been back in Scotland?
Sorry, how long have I been back? I've been back since January 2017, so this is year 4.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to hijack the questioning just for a minute because I'm really curious. You've been back for 4 years. Almost 4 years. And how old are the kids?
My eldest is 17 and the youngest is 14.
Have their accents changed?
No.
Really?
Do they sound Aussie?
Yeah.
Wow. The reason I ask, I've got a friend who's Canadian. The daughter was born in Canada, lived there till she was 5. And whenever I hear her talk to her friends, full on Aussie. But when she talks to family back home, full on Canadian. Like she switches very quickly. So I wasn't sure. I'm fascinated by this just because I've got a son. So sorry, we can switch subjects. But
That's
okay.
okay.
I love it.
The bilingual, what my son does do, he's hilarious. He's very good with accents. So he'll put on the full on Paisley accent. He's in college in Paisley and he puts it on. You would think he was Scottish, but it's and then if he's deciding to be Australian, he really, really works the Australian. So it's almost like he plays it for laughs.
yeah.
So that makes me think, when you went home, Megan, did people think you sounded Australian?
Sometimes I think there's some things that I say that are probably, I use a lot of Australian slang now that I probably never did before, and things that I never understood when I got to Australia. But the way that everybody shortens things, the thing that really confused me was reading something in the paper about the Garbos going on strike, and I just thought about Greta Garbo, and I thought, this is odd. I didn't know.
That's so.
There's a whole lot of Greta Garbo.
So for anybody listening who doesn't understand Australia, Australians love to shorten everything and add a vowel to the end of the word. So Garbo is garbage, and then Garbo is represents a Garbo man. Whereas even with friends, they'll say like Shane is Shano, or Gabriel or is Gabbo. Like it's just ridiculous.
We usually take
everything.
your last name though. We'll usually take your last name and then butcher it. But yeah, like you go to the servo, like people just like, what are you talking about?
So explain to everyone what a servo is, because most people outside of Australia.
Well, I'll say service station, but they never knew what that was in America. So that's a gas station.
It's a gas station. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the term in Scotland, Megan?
Petrol station, I guess.
Petrol, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. It's a very UK type of expression. So related to your accent, when you moved to Sydney, and we've talked about this a lot in the other episodes. What were the barriers for people to understand you? Like, what did you have to change? What were the things that were very clear to you? Like, I cannot say this way again because if nobody will understand me.
Pretty much everything.
Oh, Australians.
They used to look at me and smile and go, "Oh, your accent's so cute. I can't understand you, but your accent's so cute."
So I heard a comedian many years ago, English comedian, who's explained to me, and I spent some time in Leith Walk in Edinburgh, and it was the first time I really ever deeply entrenched myself in that accent, and I had a really tough time, and it took me about a week of drinking heavily to really understand it, which then when this comedian said this made perfect sense. Scottish is the cross between English and drunk. And I don't mean that in a bad, disparaging way.
Oh no.
But it's so different than every other form of English that when my wife, who's Eastern European, talks about, well, I can understand 50% of Polish people and 30% of Ukrainian, now I get it. Whereas I always thought I could kind of understand Australians or English, but when it came to Scottish, like it's such a different form of English that now I get that, barrier that's just kind of, I know it's the same language, but it's different enough that it seems different. Yeah. Sorry, I love the accent too, but it's the language like Denny Ken, like Denny Ken is basically, does that mean okay or something like that?
Denny Ken means they don't know, and I think this is the thing. There's actually so many different dialects in Scotland, and Glasgow people sound completely different from people in Edinburgh, who sound completely different from people in Dundee and Aberdeen, and they also use different words. For example, in where I was born in Paisley from Glasgow.
What are the distances between these places?
I think the differences are that they were very much built around the industry that was local. So you had these villages that were built around industry. So for example, Renfrew, where I am at the moment, my grandfather was an engineer working for Babcock's, which was a big manufacturing company, which is literally next door to where I stay now, which is quite interesting. So the flat that I stay in now was one of the flats that was built for the Babcock's workers. So if you come to Renfrew, there are all these houses that were built for different echelons of the workers at Babcock's. So that was a wee village, and people didn't go outside their village. So the pubs were designed for the men, and they were local. So the women knew where to go and get the men at 5 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever on a Friday to get some of the wages back off them. But yeah, if you look around here, you can see the pubs are all sort of that way. So they had to walk to the pubs and walk back from the pubs and hopefully sober up before they go home. So Glasgow was built around the shipyards. So Billy Connolly talks about this a lot, and that was the big industry there and the big employer there. The big employer in Dundee would have been the dockyards. And so there's a huge history of, for example, people coming from overseas on the boats and just staying in Dundee. So Dundee's got a different feel altogether as well. So what you're getting is the parlance that came from those little tiny villages of workers.
How far apart are these geographically to have such a disparaging? Because I find the UK in general, like the accents, if you look at the different accents in America, they're very spread out. You have to travel for many, many hours to get to them. Whereas in the UK, you could take a 1 hour train ride and walk into a place and it's different. Scotland seems to be somewhat the same because Glasgow and Edinburgh are not that far apart, but they're very, very different. Like how far apart are they?
So you could drive to Edinburgh in about an hour and a bit. Paisley and Glasgow are 5 miles apart. Dundee is probably a wee bit further away. It's probably about 4-hour drive, something like that, maybe. So they're not, but in terms of geographically, if you look at Scotland, it's actually quite tiny, and people there's the neck of Scotland. There's all this stuff up here. So if you look at Scotland, it's sort of drawn like this, and there's all this stuff up here where nobody stays. There's maybe a few crofts and some sheep, and then everybody's down in the neck of Scotland here. And that's where all the networks are, the rail networks, and where the main ports are. So actually, geographically, we're all quite quite close together, and certainly closer, I think, than say Sydney and Melbourne would be. So you can understand geographically why people sound so different. I think because they are disparate, aren't they?
Yeah, that's fascinating. As a Papua New Guinean, we have the most languages and dialects in the world, the same number that all of Africa has, but we have 5 million people. And the way it's been explained is the terrain, because of the islands and the mountains and the rivers full of crocodiles, everybody kind of stays in their place. And we have this thing called the one talk system, which in Pidgin means one talk, so connected by language. And it is a way that people identify their family and their locals, and it actually solidifies that those disparate groups that you're talking about. So when you think about it, it turns out to be about 1,500 languages and dialects around amongst 5 million people. My name comes from a language spoken by about 4,000 people. So like when you think about it, it doesn't matter how small the place is. I kind of think that actually intensifies it. Like, you stay over there, we'll stay over here.
And it even comes down to just that real, almost distrust that Glaswegians have for people in Edinburgh. Folk will come to Scotland and they'll be asked the innocent question. So what did you think of Edinburgh? This is Glasgow people.
But that happens everywhere. Like Sydney and Melbourne is the same way. It's like, we want you to like our place a little bit more than you like the other place,
But it's even more so in Scotland, because what happens is then you start to sabotage Edinburgh if you're from Glasgow.
I love it. I love it.
I love it.
So, and the sabotage is full of English people.
That's terrible. I always used to say, if you wanted to work with Aussies, you worked in London. If you wanted to work with Brits, you worked in Sydney. It's
very true.
It's true. You said how many years in Sydney? Did you say 17?
17, yeah.
Wow, that's a while. So I know you decided to go back and then went a couple of years later or something. What makes you leave 17 years of a home and go to your other home? I mean, without going into, like, it doesn't have to be personal, but like something must really change.
Family, and really it was, when I left Scotland, my parents were actually quite young, and they were in their 60s, and they were very vibrant and full of life and strong. And they travelled to Australia quite a few times. And then as time went on, and this is the thing, I can accept now, and I'm 55 now, but I don't feel like I'm any older than 35. It's just that people keep reminding me, oh, you're getting on a bit. No, I'm not. Absolutely not. And the thing is, though, you start to see, especially when you're away from people for a while, and I don't know if you feel this, Jim, when you're away, and certainly I know we've spoken about this, Dara, if you don't see people for a while, they suddenly age much more quickly than they would if you saw them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. But digital technologies made it a bit easier, where I can now, I think about when my grandparents left Europe and moved to the US, they never saw their family again, ever. Now, I've been out of the US for 20 years. I FaceTime my mother every week with my son. So I can kind of see that. It's a bit easier now. 10 years ago, not so much, but now it happens. But what you don't see is what they're like every day, because people put on a mask when they're on a camera.
They move slower, and they're a little bit grayer, and you see the wrinkles. And it was always a shock coming home for me to see my parents' age. I totally get that. I think the repatriate thing has really fascinated me, having come home, but not for as long. One thing I know about you is that you changed careers while you were in Sydney. So lawyer in Scotland, lawyer in Sydney, changed careers, go back. Did that make it different? Like, can you talk us through that?
Yeah, one thing that I actually will always be thankful to Australians for is I think Australians have got this real, I want to do something and therefore I'm going to do it. And I if somebody says to me, you can't do it, I'm not going to listen to them, because I want to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. Whereas Scottish people sometimes say, oh, you can't do it. Well, yeah, you're probably right. And then people sit there for the longest time not doing what they really wanted to do, because people come up with many excuses for them to not do it. So what I did was I changed career, first of all, from teaching law to teaching movement. I became a yoga teacher and a Pilates teacher.
Wait, you were a lawyer and then you became a yogi?
Yeah.
Well, that's huge.
Just a smidge.
Holy crap.
Different.
Yeah, there's quite a few stories in there, Jim. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. We probably don't have time, but I would love to hear them.
Some of them I might have to be careful with, even all these years later.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, sorry, continue. I just, that's a huge change, and I was not prepared to hear that answer. So please go ahead.
Again, I'm about to change, well, not change career, but add on to that career. So I'm about to become a physiotherapist. So it's all been this like full circle from very much book work to being really hands-on. You know, what I found was being again in Australia, looking at the lifestyle it was very, I arrived in Australia, I wasn't very healthy. I thought I was okay, but I tended to eat too much. I certainly drank too much, and the Scottish people tend to drink a lot more than we think we do. And then you'll do a test and they'll go, oh, you're a binge drinker. You go, no, I'm not. I don't drink that much. You never tell the doctor the truth when you go, because you do know they're silently adding at least 10 units to what you say you're drinking a week. So there was a lot of that. And then you move to Australia, and people generally in Sydney that I came across, and this is obviously a generalization based on being in a law firm, people were much fitter, they were much more active, they were much more interested in their health. And certainly a lot of the older people I saw were in better shape than people I saw the same age in Scotland. So activity and lifestyle started to become important to me too. And I slowly started to take care of myself a bit better, going to Pilates classes myself, going to yoga classes and feeling the difference. And certainly I don't think I would have been able to have my 2 children had I not practiced yoga. I don't think my lifestyle was healthy enough to support that. And so I'm quite thankful to that sort of change in my activity and even my mindset about exercise, which used to be basically I've taken a walk down to the shops or back from the pub, that's my 10,000 steps, to okay, it's morning, I need to get up and go for a run, and then I need to do my yoga in the evening, and then I feel like I've actually put a beginning and end on the day. So that was part of the process of change, and realizing that you can have as many lawyers as you like in the world, but it's not going to add to your quality of life.
Yeah.
Is it
That's
really?
Good. Change is a big part of what we want to talk about, because that transforms you. And it's interesting. We didn't even have to ask the question, Damana. She's told us one of the big changes that happened to her as a going away, because we asked people what's changed about you since you left. And a lot of people, I think when you ask them what's changed about them, most people, their ego will not allow them to think that they ever had to change. But every expat I've ever known says this changed me in this way, and that's fantastic. Were there any other changes that happened as a result of moving to Australia?
Oh yeah, I think I looked at everything differently, including my relationships with people. You know, the light's different in Australia. I don't know if you've noticed that when you've come to the UK, both of you. I know definitely, Damana, you've been in the UK. The light's different. Yep. And the light changes in a different way in Australia through the year. So I think as a metaphor, you see things differently because you're in a different place. There is a difference in the flora and the fauna and in the light. So in the very smallest sense, as soon as you step off a plane, you're looking around going, what's different? Yeah. And then as you stay for a while, you look to see what's the same, and you're constantly trying to find points of sameness, but it's that very differentness about the process of moving somewhere else that starts that process of looking at yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good statement of observation. You're somewhere else, and so you start to look at yourself differently. That's great.
So you changed jobs, you changed a lot of things about yourself. When you went home, did you change again? Like, did you make major changes again?
Yeah, good question.
Because Because I mean,
Yeah.
I've come home and I live in, I'm living in Brisbane and I'm doing other things and I'm not the same person I was when I was here before. But some of that has happened since returning. So does it change you again?
Yes. Well, when I came back, I really I realized I couldn't continue with the marriage that I was in. It become slowly more and more I want to say toxic. What happens is over a 17-year period when you move somewhere else, of course, if one person's changing a certain way and the other person is not changing in the same way, then you diverge. And what was certainly clear to me when I came back was I had the opportunity to change that. It wasn't a great time, but I separated from my husband when we got back. And that was pretty hard going on the kids. However, now that they're back and they're in school, they're more of their friends who come from families which have separated, reblended and so on, then I think they would have come across in that same circle that they were in Sydney. So they see it as normalized now. Yeah. And that also, for me, for them, it gives them the opportunity to say, you know what, things don't work, you can change it. And certainly with relationships, I think the same as moving abroad, everything's fluid. If something doesn't work, if you don't want to spend time with anyone anymore, then talk about it for sure, but move on from it and be glad and actually thankful to the person for the time that you spent with them, and really honor that time, but say that time's gone. It's time to do something else.
It's very hard for people to see it that way.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything in life, not just relationships.
It also matches what you said about changing scene changes context and the way you look at things. I read somewhere that when you make big changes, other big changes come at you, whether you like it or not. And I've kind of been conscious about that, keeping track of it.
Is it, sorry to ask, I want to ask the question to you, Damana. Is it they come at you or you recognize the opportunity from them and you take them? Because that's, to me, that's what's changed about me is now I see them and I'm like, do I want that or not? And then I go for it or I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I mean is it's not instigated, like it's not conscious. Yeah. Yep. And when it comes to like, oh, this is happening, then you said like you ask. But there are things that you just learn stuff about yourself, right? Yeah, I'm really fascinated by it, especially like now I think we just need a repatriate show because that's fascinating.
We could do a lot of that, yes.
It's interesting. Will you move again?
Not necessarily. Not at the moment, because I think particularly where we are, I would have thought about moving maybe short term to the continent, but with Brexit, that's not an option anymore.
Yeah,
bye, David Cameron.
Give it 4 years, one of the kids will move to Sydney and you're going to come back. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, maybe.
visit, it's fine. Jim, do you have questions? Sorry, I've been dominating.
No, you haven't. I feel like I've been dominating. So I like this question a lot. We asked this when you got to Sydney. I mean, I know you've probably read enough about Australia. When you got to Australia, for you, were there any shocks for you? Like, I wasn't prepared for that. I mean, what are those, and what do they stand out? Like, what were they?
I think one of the things that got me is just quite how do you say this? Take no prisoners, Australians are.
What do you mean by that?
It's a bit like, oh, okay, that was a bit direct. Scottish people tend to use humour as a way to make a point without actually, and I think there's certain cultures do that. You kind of, there's a unwritten rule that if somebody oversteps the mark, there'll be, there's a little bit of and Scottish people do it with sarcasm. Which is kind of like the claws come out like, okay, you've gone too far. But I don't think there's you've gone too far.
Yeah.
At least from a Scottish perspective.
Yes. Well, we've talked about sarcasm. So what do you think? Because Damon and I have talked about Australian sarcasm, which to me is very flat. And I'm going to say something so ridiculous in the flattest possible way, and I'm going to keep running with it until you either figure it out. If you don't, I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to keep running. What do you think is the difference between that and Scottish sarcasm?
Scottish sarcasm is very, very pointed. So, for example, if the kids haven't done the dishes, you go, "Thank you for doing the dishes." And you say it just like that.
Yeah. Whereas Australian sarcasm is more like, a tourist would come into town and they'd say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and ride a kangaroo to school," and they'll never correct. They'll never say, because Americans love to say, they'll say that and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm only joking." Australians will never add the "I'm joking"
It's
at
like
the end.
drop bears. I have friends who still think drop bears are a thing.
Yeah.
And you're like,
for anyone watching, look up drop bears and you'll understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome. The one question I really like, apart from the culture shock one, is when you were in Australia and you look back at Scotland, did you find anything cringeworthy about home? And now the other way around, you look back at home in Australia and see things that are cringeworthy?
We said something about not getting involved in religion at the start. Well, this is the start of that, jumping that fence. So what I find really cringeworthy, and I still find it cringeworthy in Scotland, is the sectarianism. So by that, what I mean is, for example, I grew up and I was brought up as a Roman Catholic, and the school I was in was a state-funded Roman Catholic school. And then up the road, there was a non-denominational school, and you would get beaten up or yelled at by the kids because you were a Catholic, or quote a Tim, which is the term that they use in the west of Scotland. And it's been fueled by centuries of conflict. They'll say it's Northern Ireland and the UK. I don't know. I actually don't want to go down the history of that. It's a bit depressing. But when I came back to Scotland, it seemed to me that there was a bit less of that. So, for example, when my dad went to for his apprenticeship, they used to take only boys who'd been to Paisley Grammar. But the year that my dad went for an apprenticeship, nobody had qualified in architecture from Paisley Grammar, so they had to take someone from a Catholic school. But the fact that my dad had done an apprenticeship with a non-Catholic firm meant that he then had doors opening for him further down his professional career.
Wow, so it's structural, like it's in the structure of society. Wow. And
how long did that, I mean, does that still persist, that type of sectarianism and discrimination against others?
I don't know, Jim, because they're not quite as obvious about it anymore.
Yeah. Because America's was like that. I'm from a Roman Catholic family, and in the 60s, my grandmother would tell me about people's attitudes towards Roman Catholics versus I guess Protestants or other forms of denominations, and it's gone to the point where, and maybe I'm just because I'm a dude. I'm less observant about.
I'm always accusing him of not understanding because he's a dude,
which is totally acceptable, and it could be true. But it's, and when I hear people talk about this in Europe, especially, and I know that a lot of this is deep-rooted, long history. It almost, but when I lived in the UK, I never noticed it, and I don't think I was looking for it, but. And maybe I'm foolish to think that maybe times are changing faster than they are, but I don't really, I mean, I hope they are, but that's why I'm asking if it's still there.
Well, the thing is now, it's obviously there's legislation that would stop you discriminating against people, so they wouldn't be obvious about it.
Yeah. So they've learned to do it other ways, to hide it other ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And discrimination went from being very, very obvious, the obvious discrimination against women when I went for my traineeship. Oh, you're not thinking about having a family, are you? I mean, you wouldn't be allowed to ask that question now. But the fact of the matter is that they will find other ways of finding out information, or they'll make assumptions about you. And so you don't even get through the door in the first place.
Yeah.
And that could be, for example, that you have a name that doesn't sound right. You know, you have a Polish name in Scotland and they'll think, oh, right, well, we're not even gonna get you in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of prejudice in Scotland, which I find appalling. And as somebody who ostensibly is a white Scottish person, I mean, I'm not really. I'm kind of like you, Jim. I'm Eastern Europe. Did you say you're Eastern European or your wife is?
My partner is.
Okay, yeah. But so my family background is Eastern European. So when I was growing up, and I got white hair now, it's not quite as obvious. When I was growing up, I used to get, oh, where are you from? Well, you're very exotic, aren't you? Which is just, you know, a euphemism for you're not white Scottish. So yeah. I mean, I don't want to make it really unpleasant, but I do find it cringeworthy about the Scots that they'll claim that they're not prejudiced, but they are.
America's really very much the same way. It's not overt, but you know, then they find subtle ways to you know, to mask it, and it's disturbing. A lot of it, the only way to really uncover it is with data. You know, people have done studies where they've, you know, taken the same resume or CVs and sent them out to jobs, but they've changed the names to African American names and very Caucasian names, and you know, the African American names get like 50% less callbacks. You know, so it happens, but it's people don't want to admit it. The thing that shocked me when coming to Australia was the racism was blatant. Like it was out front. America's becoming more like that now, but that was the shock for me coming to Australia. In Scotland, is there a minority, like visually, not just name, but is there a minority that stands out that gets discriminated against, or is it more name and culture, little subtle things that you're
and
talking
is it
about
racism?
before?
Like there's also classism and stuff like that. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Like what dominates? What's your ism?
Do you know, somebody actually, there's a conversation always about isms, and there's quite a few activists and writers and people much more intelligent than me on this process and this topic have said that the main ism is racism, and if you deal with that ism, you'll deal with all the other isms.
Yeah.
Because basically what you're talking about is you have a minority of people who have, for whatever reason, control, and they will continue to have control until you dismantle that completely. And then we will not be dealing with minorities. The minority will be the people who are actually trying to stop the rest of us getting the same opportunities.
Yep.
So that's what I feel about it. And certainly in Scotland, and in the UK, you know, in the UK, it was always the private school, the public school boys. And that's still the case. So if you look, for example, in the UK now, if you look at the UK government, they're like minus 1% of the population, but they're making all the rules for everybody, including the standard of life that people have, which they have no understanding of.
Yeah, because they don't understand what it's like to live at that level. And is Scotland, do you think, going to go for independence after the Brexit?
You know, there was Nicola Sturgeon's been very cagey about it. That's their party politics. The SNP's party politics is to get Scottish independence. So as long as there's an SNP party in Holyrood, and we have an SNP First Minister, that will be on the agenda, whether or not she goes for in her term or whether the next First Minister does. But yeah, Scotland's voted for the SNP, which means Scotland's voted for independence. The English government doesn't accept that we voted for independence and have said that they'll resist it. The question is whether they can resist it. So that will be an interesting thing to watch.
Well, there's your path to EU.
Yeah.
There's your path to mainland Europe right there. If you can help make that happen, there you go.
Yeah. So it's a question of not so much if, but when.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that's a positive thing. So I was thinking of you came over to Sydney so long ago now, but I'm still gonna ask if you remember when I changed countries. I always have this first like 3 to 6 months where I'm like, what did you do? Why did you change it? Was that the right thing? Crying, sobbing, stuff like that. Did you have that? Like, even when you went home, were you like, oh my God, did I leave? Like, was that the right thing to do? What were your feelings when you went home?
When I went home to Scotland, you mean?
Yeah, or even got over to Australia. That's a massive change. That's different weather, different, like a lot of different things.
I missed my parents dreadfully. And I remember, and it's actually etched in my mind, we were going to the departure gate in Glasgow Airport, and I looked back at them both and I thought, what happens if I don't see you again?
Yeah.
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 That's a tough one. And it's a long way home. If they get sick, it's a very long way home.
And back to what you were saying, Jim, and it's absolutely true. You know, people used to go to the US from Ireland or Scotland and they didn't see their family again. Yeah. And so I felt that very strongly. And it was obviously the excitement of being someplace new and new experiences and a new place. It was like being on holiday. So part of me could feel that and deal with the pain, but then it didn't really lessen. It's kind of like this. Yeah, it's this little scar that you have in your heart that you take with you.
Do you think you would have done it had it been by boat? And you would have, because I mean, I took comfort in the fact that if something happens to my mother and my grandmother, well, in less than 24 hours, I could be home. But if I don't think I would have had the courage to do this 100 years ago, there's no way I could have done that.
No, absolutely not. We actually need support. I know there are a lot of people out there who don't have family support, and there are many people who come from families which are so fractured that probably it was the biggest and the best thing that they ever did was to move somewhere else. Yeah. I've always been supported by my parents. My dad was very supportive, even with some of my more outlandish decisions, and like he's yeah, okay, go for it. What are you going to do with that, and how are you going to make it work? And had I not had that support from them via, I mean, those days it was a phone call, and then subsequently through Skype and now Zoom, I wouldn't have done it either.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you find, and I think every expat does this when they leave, you found your family away from home as well. Like there's that, and the people that don't do that, it's like, was that a hard process for you to go through and find the group of people that are like, if I'm going to spend 17 years here or the rest of my life here, these are the people that are it. Like, was that a struggle, or was that easy when you moved to Australia?
Oh, it wasn't easy at all. I don't know whether it was because, I don't know whether it was because I was in Sydney and people in Sydney would, they'd be very friendly and reach out to you. However, there was a sense that you weren't going to be there long enough to them to put a huge amount of effort in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially if you're from, the UK, whereas everyone's used to people from the UK only staying for a year and then pissing off. So why invest? That I never really thought about that. We've talked about expats in the last episode. What is the perception of expats leaving Scotland? Is it Americans kind of look at expats as like this kind of, you're betraying America, but what are the perceptions of expats in Scotland?
Oh, so if you moved to Australia, I think certainly we thought that we'd watched one of these property programs. I thought we were going to be staying in this huge house with a swimming pool, and that didn't happen.
You moved to Sydney.
So I mean, we did actually move to a place that was on the river down in Oatley, which is it? I can always forget. It's King George's River, isn't it? St. George's River. I can't remember.
You think I know this, but I don't.
I'll send you a picture. It was very lovely. So my then husband sent him off to look for flats, and he got to Bondi, and of course Bondi, we thought, yeah, Bondi, but he did a cockroach count in every house that he looked at, and he went, yeah, Megan's not going to stay here. If there was more Yeah, there's more than one dead cockroach because she's not going to stay here, or I can't stay here because she'll scream every time she sees the cockroach. So we moved down to Oatley, which was on the train line, and that was it was an interesting experience, because that was kind of the Australian dream that we thought we were going to have, which was the house on the water. And certainly for my husband, it's the kind of place I've always dreamed of staying in, because there were leafy trees, and you come out in the morning on the balcony and the cockatoos would be sitting looking at you going,
yeah.
what you got, Rose?
Yep.
And lorikeets, and yeah, just this incredible Australianness that I had expected, and we got. And I'm glad that was my first experience. And probably the house itself was horrible. It had been very badly renovated about 25 years before we moved in, and nothing really had been done to it since, apart from a coat of paint. However, the location was so splendid.
Yeah. I've read enough about share houses that you have to have that dodgy experience to really experience the Australian life, so good on you, as they say.
So we kind of get, as I said, the image everyone has of Australia is that everyone has a swimming pool, and
I guess it depends where. But it's not like the property shows, for sure. That's cool. So coming from like the home of the deep fried Mars bar, what did you think when you came over to Australia? Was there a food from here that you miss? And when you were here, did you miss the deep fried Mars bar? Was there something from Scotland that you missed? Sorry, I just can't let go of that, but I know that was invented after you left.
So the deep fried Mars bar was made for tourists. It wasn't made
I believe that,
for other people. Yeah.
That sounds very American, like not. Yeah, anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
There is something truly dreadful, and I found out the actual name of it on one of my lectures, because my lectures were like to chat away at the start of our online lectures, and someone was going on about a pizza crunch. And I thought, well, I'm really not very patriotic. What is a pizza crunch? So, can you guess what a pizza crunch is?
A battered deep fried pizza?
You got it.
Okay.
Now that is very popular.
And I bet you they use the same batter they use on the fish, because that's what they do in Australia.
Wait. So they make a whole pizza, and then they just use the same batter that they use on fish, and then they deep. Wow, I've never heard of this. Do they roll it, or is it still flat?
No, just flat.
I don't know, because I haven't had one. I have no interest.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Considering your yogi profession, I would assume it's something you would not indulge yourself, but
I'm only guessing because of the Mars bar thing. I've never had one, but I'm
gonna write this down because I need to look this up.
I'm sure they do it in Australia. But so was that a Scottish thing, or was that an Australian thing?
I really don't know. I don't know who thought of it. I think, for example, a lot of things are fried in Scotland. So if you go to the chip shop, you get deep fried haggis. You'll get what I think they call in the show the battered salve.
Yeah, we have battered salves.
Yeah. So you can get a sausage without the batter, sausage with the batter. There's what's called a fritter. So that's the potato that's been battered. And then very popular school kids, you get 3 fritters for £2.
Is a Scottish egg really Scottish?
A Scottish name, really.
Egg, a Scottish egg.
Scottish egg.
Yeah, the deep fried. What is it? An egg? It's a hard-boiled egg or semi-hard-boiled, covered in. Then it's wrapped in sausage. Then it's deep battered, and then it's deep fried. And then if you cook it correctly, the yolk is still runny.
Ooh, that sounds actually quite good. I've never had
those
one.
are.
Have you had one of these, Megan?
Well, you get them, but they tend to come in the shop, and they've been hard-boiled eggs with, the sausage meat around it, and then breadcrumbs around it. This version sounds actually quite nice.
I've had some ones with runny yolks, but not very often. Apparently they're very hard to do, as you can imagine.
Yeah, that would be. an art
He's
form,
also in
actually.
East Sydney, so it's probably a bougie restaurant that like serves them up, right? Did you have
No,
it?
no, I had it when I was in Edinburgh like 15 years ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
That's
good.
I need the address. I need the address, Jim.
My memory's going, so I can't really. I can remember vague things about. I spent a week in Leith when I was there. Like I can't, and I drank a lot, so I can't really remember everything.
You had to get the
Um,
accent somehow.
What? So, foods. What are the foods you miss from Australia?
The foods I miss, oh man, I mean, it's probably not a surprise. The fresh mangoes as they came in at
Yes.
Christmas time. Oh, what absolute delight. You get a tray of mangoes and you stick your nose in it, go, oh, it's like, it's you don't get fruit in the UK like that. You don't get fruit that smells like fruit
I
unless
never
you
had a
get
mango until I moved
strawberries.
here, and it transformed my idea of what fruit can be. I love mangoes a lot. So sorry I cut you up, but I really love mangoes, and I want to state that
So
for everyone.
can you not get mangoes at all? Fresh mangoes at all?
You get mangoes, but they're that size and they're green, and you could use them as cricket balls. And they never really get, because when you get something that's not ripe when it comes off the tree, it doesn't then suddenly magically ripen. And you can put bananas next to it, it still doesn't ripen. You don't get that if something comes off fresh. So there's that combination of just well, that's the thing about Australia, isn't it? They've got the very distinct seasons on fruit. So I remember in the spring, those beautiful Queensland pineapples, those sweet, sweet pineapples, and the little tiny ones, and I just couldn't get enough of those. And then once the season's gone, that's it. You know, you've had it. That's your chance. And then the next year you get that again. Whereas in the UK, everyone relies on getting food from overseas, and it's never really that fresh unless we get local produce in the summer. And we do get good local produce like strawberries and so on, and apples. But if you're relying on tropical fruit, it just doesn't grow in the UK. And so you're not going to get that incredible sensory experience of this beautiful fresh piece of fruit that smells amazing and tastes incredible. So that's what I miss.
Yeah.
Was there a food that from Scotland that when you got to Australia, like you felt you needed to introduce everyone to? Because I don't know enough about Scottish food to know that there's anything that exists. It's usually everyone talks about haggis and things like that, like which most people be like, oh, but is there anything that you thought, oh, I got to show this to the world?
And I didn't manage it. There is what's known as the Morton's roll.
What is that?
You tell.
It's a bread roll. It's a bread roll. Yeah. So back to what we talked about the villages. So in every town in Scotland, you'll find that there's these little vans on the way to work. So they'll have a van doing fried eggs, square sausage, what they call link sausage, which is your normal sausage that everyone's used to, and black pudding, potato scones, and it's all put into this roll, and it's a roll that's fluffy in the middle and crisp on the outside. So even if your egg goes, the squishy bits of the yolk go into this lovely soft inside, but you've got the crunchy outside, so you don't end up with squishy bits of egg all over your fingers. So I couldn't figure out what it was until I did some research that was so different about these rolls, why they were so crispy on the outside and so fluffy. And you only get 24 hours out of them. They're dead from the neck up after about 5 o'clock. So they produce all these fresh every day. And they ferment for about 16 hours. So, they're obviously very, very busy people baking all over Glasgow. What creates the difference is they use what's called rice cones on the outside of the crust. So it's kind of similar to when you get a good Italian pizza dough that's got the polenta flour that gives you that crunch. These rice cones give the bread rolls this beautiful crunch, and you get them in different colors. So you'll get them medium, well-fired, or extremely well-fired. So there's these things that look like they've been completely burnt to crisp, but again, when you open them up on the inside, they're fluffy. So everybody's got their preference.
What's it
so
called
when
again?
You go to pick up,
it's a Morton. What'd you say? A Morton?
Roll.
Morton's rolls. So I'll spell it
Morton's
for you.
rolls.
Actually, I'll share you a picture.
Yeah.
I'll share you a picture.
That's
This sounds
so good.
delicious.
I'm hungry again.
Okay, I've written that down as well. So pizza crunch and Morton's roll.
Morton's
We
roll.
love food, by the way, in case you haven't noticed.
Oh,
We always
Just, you
become
know,
a food podcast in the end. Everyone just talks about food.
Yes.
oh, but it's isn't that the thing though? When you go somewhere else, it's like, what can I try? What have you got for me?
Yes.
That's great. We should actually go. I've had a great conversation, by the way. We should go into our speed round.
And we've already asked many of the questions from the speed round as well.
I think we actually did ask a lot.
We
of the
have.
questions.
I've been looking through them. I'm like, crap, we're not gonna have any questions for the speed round.
Well, one we always get to that I don't know, I really like is the myths that you have to bust.
Oh yeah.
About Australia and about Scotland. So when you're in Australia, you know, what do people ask you about Scotland? You're like, so not true. And the other way around.
Okay. So people, I think in Australia assume that men wear kilts all the time.
Everyone around the world thinks that everyone in Scotland wears, all the men wear kilts. So yes.
I always take that question one step further. Like, Megan knows what I mean. The answer is yes.
Do it.
Do they wear nothing under their kilts? That's what I always ask.
Well, they should do, and most do. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Why didn't I just ask you this like when I met you 10 years ago?
Well, maybe you were just shy then.
Yeah, possibly.
I can't imagine Damana ever having been shy.
I probably had other questions. We talked about shoes a lot.
We did talk about shoes. We didn't even talk about shoes today. And
I know. I was thinking about it.
I'll tell you what. If you want to talk about shoes, just let me know, and we can wrap up, and you guys can continue. I don't know anything about wearing shoes.
Megan's had this awesome blog, and it was called Shoes and Law, I think it was, and then it went to Shoes and Yoga, and it was great. But there were always shoes. Like nice. Always had shoes in it. It was a really good.
And I bullied Damana into doing a blog post for me. So I think it's actually fair for me to return she wrote a lovely, really beautiful blog post for me, which I think is still there on her shoes. A previous generation of shoes. So that was the kilt thing. So yes.
So what about Australia? When you go back home, back home, do they ask you anything about Australia?
About the kangaroos. Now, it took me a long time to find a kangaroo, and they were very well disguised. I was disappointed in this. I was expecting to see a lot more kangaroos. So just saying, get on it, Australia.
Did you leave the city enough to? Because I've seen, we get out of the city a lot and drive between Canberra and Sydney, and I see them all the time.
Yeah, when you get out of, that's the thing, when you get out, we had to get out, and the first time I saw them, it was, we were looking out, we were staying in a motel which had a field out the back, and there were just all what looked like little hillocks in the sunset, and as the sunset dropped, the hillocks got up and started hopping about. Well, that must be the kangaroos. I just didn't know what I was looking for. Yeah. And it was and when you're in Scotland, of course, you're looking for certain things, and you get used to this kind of, which you think is a rat, it's actually a squirrel. Yes. And you get used to the animal movements. So yeah, eventually I did get to see them, but I guess it was because I didn't know what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Ah, that's fascinating. I've never heard that one before.
On to the myths. Let's talk about the stereotypes of people between the countries. What are the stereotypes that were wrong between, Australians looking at Scotland and Scottish looking at Australians, or even correct? It doesn't really matter. Like anything relating to that.
I think the probably the stereotype that I think is the most unfair stereotype about Scottish people is that we're mean. I don't think I've ever come across a Scottish person who's not really generous.
I haven't.
Yeah. But it's just one of these stereotypes that seems to continue. And honestly, you would find, for example, if you needed something, if you moved home here and you didn't have furniture, and you said to someone within maybe 48 hours, various people, friends of friends and friends of friends, would descend on you with furniture and dried goods and all sorts. So that's one that's not, that I don't think is fair. Australians, I think, I think that the unfair stereotype that Australians have comes from programs like Neighbours, and that everyone lives in these big houses, and they're all blonde and tanned, and actually Australians are really, really diverse. And that's one of the things I enjoyed so much about Australia, was the sheer diversity. Australians from everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And it's a very, very diverse country. And I'm glad that my children grew up in such a diverse country, because it means that they don't have cultural or race stereotypes. So,
is there much diversity in Scotland?
It's getting there. There's more. I mean, when I was growing up in Scotland, there were a lot of South Asians, and there were a tiny number of East Asians. So now you'll find, for example, there are many more Polish people. So there's a big Polish community in Scotland. There's slowly representation coming from all races and colours coming into Scotland. And I think that's a good thing. Scotland really needs it to survive. If we're going to go for independence, it needs to be a bit more multicultural, a bit more diverse.
That's great.
I think it's something we can't, like, nobody can fight these days. Like, the world is just becoming more caramel. That's what I say. Yeah, and I was like, yes, I led the charge. Okay, so we'll wrap up with our last question, which is, what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about going and living in another country?
I would, from my personal experience, I would say, give yourself goals based on 2 years, 5 years, what you'd like to accomplish, so that you'd find yourself enjoying the country that you're in, instead of just letting time float by. And goals, I think, are just as simple as, I would like to see this, and then make that happen. There are parts of Australia I didn't see. I didn't get to far north Queensland. I didn't get to Western Australia. I didn't get to Uluru. I was there 17 years. I didn't see any of those things. And so I was partly not having a set series of goals of things that I wanted to do. And keep your eyes on the goals. In yoga, they talk about a drishti, where you look at something, and it's very easy to have your eye gaze going around and there's no focus. So have that focus. What do you want to see? What do you want to do?
Can I answer this question? Why anybody who presented the opportunity, even thinking about it, why should they do it?
Why should they do it? Because you will find yourself wherever you go. Wherever you go, you'll find a different part of yourself.
I like
think that's a, Damana, I don't know why, but that was a question I kept thinking about this week. I'm like, why are we not asking people why? Because that is, it's such the why is such an important question, and the answer is really important. So
I am going to steal that line though. You find yourself wherever you go. That's really cool. Thank you so much for taking the time. It just flew by. I feel like it was like
I know.
I thought it was 30 minutes, and I look at it, I'm like, holy crap.
I'm actually thinking we should get the shoe crew together.
Yes.
What is the shoe crew?
There's a bunch of us who would just decide on a pair of shoes, and we'd all turn up in like over the knee boots, or cool, and then go to lunch together. It was always fun. We're kind of the shoe crew.
It was fun. It was fun. It was riotous.
Right. Thank you so much for doing this. You're our first European. Is that right to call you European? I never know where the UK sits in all of that.
Well, I think we are. I think we are Northern Europeans, aren't we?
Politically, maybe not, but culturally and geographically, definitely.
Okay, cool. So you're our first person from that side of the world to come to the Antipodes. So we appreciate it.
It's our first night recording as well. We've not recorded after like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So it's dark out. So yes.
It's a good use of Sunday. I'd be just lying on the couch watching like TV or something. So this is really great. Thank you very much. It's really nice to see you again after so long.
It was very good to meet you.
Yeah.
And you.
Is that red fern in the background, Jim?
Yes, this is a laneway behind my place.